"Sign it, Christabel, or I'll make sure you lose the kids too," Anthony screamed, unaware his wife had been recording every word for the past 6 months. "My beautiful family and friends, welcome back. If you're ready for another unforgettable story, do me a quick favor, hit that like button. Why? Because every like tells YouTube, this story is worth sharing with more people who might really need it today. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I do read every single one, and it makes me feel like we're sitting together in the same room, sharing these moments heart to heart. And don't forget to share this video with someone you love. You never know, the story you share might be the encouragement they've been praying for. This isn't just a channel, it's a family. And when you engage, you're helping us build a safe space where real stories bring real hope. Now, take a deep breath. Get comfortable, and let's dive into today's story. The mahogany table that had once hosted their dinner parties now served as Anthony's stage for humiliation. Christabel sat across from him, her fingers trembling as she stared at the divorce papers, documents that would strip away 15 years of marriage, her home, her business, and worst of all, primary custody of Emma and David. The late afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of what had been their dream home, casting long shadows across the marble floors she'd personally selected during happier times. Now those same shadows felt like prison bars, and Anthony's presence filled the room with a suffocating weight of betrayal. "You really think you can take my children from me?" Christabel's voice was barely above a whisper, but something flickered behind her red-rimmed eyes, something Anthony was too drunk on his own power to notice. He leaned back in his leather chair, the same one where he used to read bedtime stories to their kids, and smiled with the confidence of a man who believed he held all the cards. "Christabel, let's be realistic here. You have no income, no assets in your name, and a history of what my lawyers will call emotional instability." He gestured dismissively at the tears staining her cheeks. "The judge will see exactly what I want them to see." What Anthony couldn't see was the tiny recording device hidden beneath Christabel's wedding ring, the ring she'd refused to remove even after discovering his affair with her former best friend, Sarah. For 6 months, she'd endured his increasingly vicious threats, his psychological warfare, his systematic destruction of her self-worth, all while quietly documenting every cruel word. "The house, the cars, even your precious little bookshop, it's all going to me," Anthony continued, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "You should have thought about the consequences before you neglected your wifely duties." The air quotes he made around the phrase were like physical blows. Christabel's bookshop, between the lines, had been her sanctuary, built from nothing with her own savings and dreams. It wasn't just a business, it was proof that she could create something beautiful and successful. The thought of losing it to Anthony's greed made her stomach churn, but she forced herself to remain still, to keep recording. "And the kids will understand eventually," Anthony added, examining his manicured nails with calculated indifference. "Children adapt. They'll see that Daddy can provide them with stability, private schools, everything their mother couldn't give them." The mention of Emma and David, her 8- and 10-year-old angels who still believed their father was a hero, nearly broke her resolve. But Christabel had learned to hide her strength behind a mask of defeat. She'd become a master actress these past months, and Anthony was her most important audience. "Please, Anthony," she whispered, letting her voice crack. "Not the children. I'll sign whatever you want, but please don't take them from me." His laugh was sharp and ugly. "Oh, but that's exactly what I'm going to do. You see, Christabel, this is what happens when you question me, when you make demands, when you forget your place." He stood up, pacing behind his chair like a predator circling wounded prey. Sarah understands her role much better than you ever did. Sarah. Even now, the betrayal cut deep. Christabel remembered the day she'd walked in on them in this very room, on the couch where she'd nursed both babies, where family movie nights had created their most cherished memories. The image was burned into her retinas, but it had also burned away her last illusions about the man she'd married. The best part, Anthony continued, his voice growing more venomous, is that everyone will see this as your fault. Poor Anthony, trying to make his marriage work while his wife became increasingly unstable, paranoid, neglectful of their children. He had orchestrated it all so carefully. The canceled credit cards that made her look financially irresponsible, the deliberately sabotaged business meetings that made her appear unreliable, the isolation from friends and family that left her without witnesses to his true nature. But Anthony had made one crucial mistake. In his arrogance, he'd underestimated the woman he'd spent 15 years trying to diminish. Christabel picked up the pen with shaking fingers, and for a moment, Anthony's smile widened. He couldn't know that beneath her defeated exterior, she was calculating, planning, preparing for a war he didn't even realize had already begun. As she brought the pen toward the paper, she looked up at him one last time. "Anthony, before I sign this, there's something I need to tell you. What do you think Christabel's first move should be? Share your thoughts below. Is she about to reveal her hand too early, or is this all part of her master plan? Anthony, before I sign this, there's something I need to tell you." The pen hovered over the signature line as Christabel's mind drifted to a memory from 3 years ago, the night everything had started to unravel. She'd been in their bedroom, nursing baby David while Emma slept peacefully in her crib, when she'd overheard Anthony on a phone call downstairs. His voice had carried through the baby monitor, cold and calculating as he discussed restructuring assets and protecting investments from potential future liabilities. She'd realized then that to Anthony, she wasn't a wife. She was a potential threat to his wealth. "What is it, Christabel?" Some last-ditch emotional manipulation. Anthony's impatience was palpable as he checked his Rolex, the same watch she'd given him for their 10th anniversary, back when she still believed their marriage meant something. But Christabel wasn't thinking about Anthony anymore. She was thinking about her children, asleep upstairs in their beds, unaware that their world was about to shatter. Emma, with her wild curls and fierce intelligence, who wanted to be a lawyer just like Mommy used to be before Anthony convinced her to abandon her law career. David, gentle and artistic, who still crawled into her lap every morning to share his dreams from the night before. They were her everything, her reason for enduring Anthony's systematic cruelty, her motivation for the elaborate game she'd been playing for months. "I just wanted to say, thank you," Christabel whispered, setting the pen down without signing. Anthony's eyebrows shot up. "Thank you for showing me who you really are." Her voice was steadier now, though tears still tracked down her cheeks. "For teaching me that the woman who graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law, who built a successful practice before she gave it all up for love, was still in there somewhere." A flicker of unease crossed Anthony's features. Christabel rarely mentioned her law background anymore. He'd worked hard to make her forget that version of herself. 3 years ago, when she'd first suspected Anthony's affairs, Christabel had made a choice. Instead of confronting him directly, she'd begun to quietly rebuild the professional network she'd abandoned. Late nights at the bookshop weren't just about inventory and accounts. They were about video conferences with Marcus Chun, her former law school study partner who now ran a forensic accounting firm in Chicago. Marcus had been the first to believe her when she'd explained Anthony's financial manipulations. "Chris," he'd said during one of their encrypted calls, "if half of what you're telling me is true, your husband isn't just hiding assets. He's running a sophisticated money laundering operation. That revelation had led her to Detective Lisa Rodriguez, a financial crime specialist who'd been building a case against Anthony's business partners for over 2 years. Lisa, a single mother herself, had understood immediately what Christabel was risking. "We need evidence," Lisa had told her during their first clandestine meeting at a coffee shop across town. "The kind of evidence that can only come from someone inside his circle." So Christabel had become a double agent in her own marriage. Every board meeting Anthony attended, every business dinner where she played the dutiful wife, every private conversation he'd had in their home, she documented it all. The recording device she wore was military grade, courtesy of Lisa's contacts in federal law enforcement. But the most valuable asset in Christabel's arsenal wasn't technology. It was her sister-in-law, Patricia. Patricia Manning, Anthony's younger sister, had never liked her brother's treatment of women. A successful tech entrepreneur herself, Patricia had watched Anthony systematically destroy Christabel's confidence with growing disgust. When Christabel had finally confided in her 6 months ago, Patricia hadn't hesitated. "That bastard," Patricia had hissed over wine in Christabel's kitchen while Anthony was supposedly working late with Sarah. He did the same thing to his first girlfriend in college. Isolated her from her friends, made her financially dependent, then discarded her when someone more convenient came along. Patricia's revelation that Anthony had a pattern, that Christabel wasn't his first victim, had been both devastating and liberating. It meant she wasn't crazy, wasn't imagining the psychological warfare. It also meant she had an ally who understood Anthony's methods better than anyone. Together, they discovered that Anthony's business empire was built on quicksand. His real estate ventures were leveraged beyond belief, propped up by increasingly desperate loans from shadowy investors. The lifestyle he flaunted, the power he wielded, it was all an elaborate facade hiding mounting debt and criminal activity. "Patricia's been helping you, hasn't she?" Anthony's voice cut through Christabel's memories, sharp with sudden suspicion. Christabel looked up, startled. Had she given something away? "I don't know what you mean," she said, but Anthony was already moving, his earlier casual cruelty replaced by something more dangerous. "My sister never liked you," he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "She wouldn't." He paused, and Christabel could see him working through possibilities, connecting dots he'd previously dismissed. The truth was, Patricia had done more than just provide emotional support. She'd used her tech expertise to help Christabel create secure communication channels, hidden financial accounts, and most importantly, a digital backup system for all the evidence they'd collected. Every recording, every document, every piece of proof was stored in multiple encrypted locations that Anthony could never access or destroy. But perhaps Patricia's greatest gift had been introducing Christabel to Jonathan Hale. Jonathan was everything Anthony pretended to be: successful, genuinely powerful, and most importantly, ethical. As the CEO of Hale Industries, a green energy company that was revolutionizing sustainable technology, he'd been looking for someone to head his new charitable foundation focused on supporting victims of domestic abuse. When Patricia had arranged their first meeting, Christabel had been terrified. She hadn't interviewed for a job in over a decade, hadn't worn her power suit since Emma was born. But something magical had happened in that conference room. She'd remembered who she used to be, who she could be again. "Mrs. Manning," Jonathan had said at the end of their 2-hour conversation, "I've interviewed dozens of candidates for this position. None of them have your combination of legal expertise, personal experience, and sheer determination. The job is yours if you want it." The salary he'd offered was more than Anthony knew she was capable of earning. The signing bonus alone would have been enough to secure her own apartment, her own life, her own future with the children. But Christabel had asked for something else instead. "I need 6 months," she told Jonathan. "I need time to gather evidence, to build an airtight case, to make sure that when I leave my marriage, my husband can't hurt me or any other woman ever again." Jonathan had understood immediately. "Mrs. Manning, you'll have whatever resources you need. And when you're ready to start your new life, Hale Industries will be waiting." Christabel. Anthony's voice was dangerous now, all pretense of civilized divorce proceedings abandoned. "What aren't you telling me?" She picked up the pen again, but instead of signing the papers, she stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see Emma and David playing in the backyard with Patricia, who'd come over to spend time with the kids, but was really there to ensure Anthony didn't become violent when he discovered the truth. "I'm telling you that you taught me something invaluable, Anthony," Christabel said, her back still to him. "You taught me that I'm stronger than I ever imagined." What do you think Anthony will do when he realizes Christabel isn't the broken woman he thought she was? Drop your predictions below. Is he about to get desperate, or does he still think he's in control? The recording device beneath her ring captured every word as Anthony's breathing grew heavier, more agitated. In a few hours, Detective Rodriguez would have everything she needed to make arrests. In a few days, Christabel would walk into her new office at Hale Industries as the director of the Phoenix Foundation, a name she'd chosen specifically because it represented rising from the ashes of destruction. But first, she had to survive the next few minutes with a man who was finally realizing he'd been outplayed by the woman he'd spent years underestimating. Anthony's phone buzzed against the mahogany table, the sound sharp and insistent in the heavy silence. He glanced at the caller ID, and his face went white. Marcus Chun, Forensic Accounting, flashed across the screen. Christabel watched her husband's expression transform from confusion to dawning horror as he stared at the name. She'd never mentioned Marcus to Anthony, never spoken about her old study partner or their midnight conversations about shell companies and hidden assets. "You need to answer that," Christabel said softly, her voice carrying a strength that made Anthony's head snap up. "How do you know Marcus Chin?" The question came out as a croak. Instead of answering, Christabel pulled out her own phone and showed him the screen. A video call was already connected, and Marcus's familiar face filled the display, along with another person Anthony didn't recognize. A stern-looking woman in a federal law enforcement jacket. "Hello, Anthony," Marcus said through the phone speaker, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent 3 years documenting financial crimes. "This is Special Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We've been wanting to talk to you." Anthony stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. "Christabel, what the hell is this?" "This is me protecting our children," she replied, walking to the mantel where their family photos stood, images of happier times that now felt like artifacts from another life. Behind the frame of their wedding picture was a small device she'd installed months ago. A camera. "Every meeting you've held in this house, Anthony. Every call with Viktor Petrov about laundering money through your real estate deals. Every conversation with your accountant about hiding assets in Emma and David's names." Her voice was steady, professional, the voice of the lawyer she'd once been. All of it recorded, all of it documented, all of it admissible in court. Anthony's breathing became ragged as the implications crashed over him. "You can't. This is entrapment. This is illegal." Agent Martinez's voice came through the phone speaker, cold and official. "Actually, Mr. Manning, recording conversations in your own home is perfectly legal. And the evidence your wife has provided has been invaluable in our investigation into the Petrov money laundering operation. The Petrov case. Anthony's knees nearly buckled. Viktor Petrov wasn't just a business associate. He was the head of an international criminal organization that used legitimate businesses to clean dirty money. Anthony's real estate empire had been their perfect front, and his greed had made him an eager accomplice. How long? Anthony's voice was barely a whisper. How long have you been? 18 months, Christabel interrupted. Since the night I overheard you telling Viktor that you'd handle your wife if she ever became a problem. That night. Anthony remembered it now. He'd been so focused on impressing Viktor, so eager to prove his usefulness, that he'd spoken freely about his plans to destroy Christabel if she ever threatened his operation. He'd thought she was asleep upstairs with the baby. But Christabel had been wide awake, listening to her husband discuss her potential elimination as casually as he might discuss the weather. The bookshop, Anthony said suddenly, pieces clicking together. All those late nights. Meeting with federal agents, forensic accountants, and building a case that will put you away for the next 20 years, Christabel finished. Between the lines wasn't just my sanctuary, Anthony. It was my war room. She moved to the bookshelf and pulled out what appeared to be a leather-bound classic novel. But when she opened it, Anthony saw it was hollow inside, containing documents, photographs, and digital storage devices. Every financial record, every communication with the Petrov organization, every threat you made against me and the children. She set the contents on the table between them. Did you really think I'd spend 15 years married to you without learning how your mind works? The front door opened, and Patricia walked in with Emma and David, but she immediately ushered them toward the kitchen when she saw the scene in the living room. Kids, let's get some ice cream, Patricia said brightly, but Christabel caught her eye and nodded, a signal they'd practiced for this moment. Patricia would keep the children safe and distracted while this played out. You've been planning this for over a year, Anthony said, the full scope of his situation finally dawning on him. The devoted wife, the broken woman, the victim, it was all an act. Not all of it, Christabel admitted, her voice softer now. The pain was real, Anthony. The nights I cried myself to sleep wondering what I'd done wrong. The way I questioned my own sanity when you made me believe I was imagining your cruelty, that was all real. She walked back to the window, watching her children through the glass as they laughed at something Patricia had said. But the woman who survived your emotional warfare? She remembered that she'd once been strong enough to graduate at the top of her law class, smart enough to build a successful practice, clever enough to see through the lies of men who underestimated her. Anthony's phone rang again. This time the caller ID read, Viktor Petrov. You should probably take that too. Agent Martinez's voice came through Christabel's phone. Mr. Petrov was arrested about 20 minutes ago at his estate in Miami. He's already asking for a deal, and I suspect your name is going to come up quite frequently in his statements. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Then Anthony's business line. Then his cell phone backup. The calls were coming from lawyers, business partners, investors, everyone connected to his crumbling empire suddenly desperate to reach him. But Anthony was staring at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. The divorce papers, he said slowly. You never intended to sign them. Christabel picked up the documents and held them toward the window, letting the afternoon light shine through the pages. These papers would have given you everything: the house, the business, custody of our children. But they were also prepared by lawyers who didn't know about your criminal activities. She tore the papers in half. The real divorce papers were filed this morning by my attorney, the same attorney representing 3 other victims of the Petrov organization. Papers that freeze all marital assets pending the outcome of federal criminal proceedings. Papers that ensure Emma and David will never be used as pawns in your games again. What do you think happens when a desperate criminal realizes he's been completely outsmarted? Share your thoughts below. Will Anthony try to run, fight, or is there an even darker twist coming? Anthony lunged toward his desk drawer, the drawer where Christabel knew he kept a gun. But as his hand closed around the handle, Detective Rodriguez stepped through the front door, her weapon already drawn. Anthony Manning, you're under arrest for money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy to commit racketeering, she announced, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting months for this moment. But Anthony wasn't looking at the detective. He was staring at Christabel with an expression of pure rage mixed with something she'd never seen before in his eyes, genuine fear of what she was capable of. "This isn't over," he snarled as Rodriguez cuffed him. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. The people I work with, they don't just destroy businesses, Christabel. They destroy lives." For the first time since this confrontation began, Christabel smiled, a cold, calculating smile that would have terrified the broken woman Anthony thought he'd married. "Anthony," she said as Rodriguez began leading him toward the door, "you still don't understand, do you? I'm not the victim in this story anymore." She picked up her phone and showed him the screen, where Agent Martinez was still connected to the call. But now there were other faces visible, other federal agents, other law enforcement officials, all watching and recording. "I'm the prosecutor." 3 weeks after Anthony's arrest, Christabel stood in the gleaming offices of Hale Industries, staring out at the Seattle skyline as she tried to focus on the foundation's budget proposal. But her mind kept drifting to the anonymous letter that had arrived at the bookshop that morning, the 3rd one this week. "You made a mistake, Christabel. Anthony was protected. Now you're not." "Mrs. Manning?" Jonathan Hale's voice made her turn from the window. He stood in the doorway of her new office, concern etched across his features. At 42, Jonathan carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd built his empire ethically, and over the past month, Christabel had found herself drawn to his steadiness in ways that both comforted and terrified her. "Please call me Christabel," she said, attempting a smile. "Mrs. Manning feels like someone else's name now." Jonathan stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. "The Seattle Times wants to do a feature story about the Phoenix Foundation. They're calling you a hero, the woman who took down a major money laundering operation while building a new life for domestic abuse survivors." But instead of looking pleased, Christabel sank into her chair. "I don't want to be anyone's hero, Jonathan. I just want my children to be safe." The custody hearing was scheduled for next week, and despite Anthony's incarceration, his legal team was arguing that Christabel's entrapment of their client proved she was mentally unstable and unfit for motherhood. They'd even brought in a psychiatrist who'd never met her to testify about her delusional paranoia and manipulative behavior. "Emma asked me yesterday if Daddy was ever coming home," Christabel continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her father is a criminal? How do you tell her that the man she idolized launders money for people who hurt others?" Jonathan moved closer, his presence both professional and something more personal that neither of them had acknowledged yet. "You tell her the truth, in age-appropriate ways. You tell her that sometimes adults make very bad choices, but that doesn't change how much both her parents love her." The truth was more complicated than that. Emma had been Daddy's little princess, the recipient of expensive gifts and special attention that Christabel now recognized as Anthony's way of ensuring the children's loyalty. David, being younger, had adapted more quickly to his father's absence, but Emma kept asking when Daddy would take her to their special restaurant again, when they'd go on another daddy-daughter shopping spree. "There's something else," Jonathan said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "My security team intercepted some concerning communications. It seems Viktor Petrov's organization is unhappy about the cooperation you've provided to federal investigators." Christabel's blood ran cold. She'd known this was a possibility. Criminal organizations didn't simply accept the loss of millions in laundered assets without retaliation. But knowing it intellectually and facing the reality were two different things. What kind of communications? "The kind that suggests they're considering you a loose end that needs to be tied up," Jonathan said grimly. "My head of security, Maria Santos, is former FBI. She wants to discuss protection protocols for you and the children." As if summoned by her name, Maria Santos knocked on the office door. A compact woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and alert eyes, Maria had the bearing of someone who'd spent decades dealing with dangerous people. "Ms. Manning," Maria said as she entered, "we need to talk about your living situation. Your current house is too exposed. Multiple entry points, neighbors far enough away that no one would hear a disturbance, and too many people know your daily routines." Christabel felt the walls closing in. She'd fought so hard for her freedom, only to find herself trapped in a different kind of prison, one made of fear and security protocols. "I won't hide from these people," she said firmly. "I won't teach my children to live in fear because their father made terrible choices." "Nobody's asking you to hide," Maria replied. "But we are asking you to be smart. There's a secure residential community about 20 minutes from here. Good schools, full security, and most importantly, other families who faced similar situations." The irony wasn't lost on Christabel. She'd spent months planning Anthony's downfall, only to discover that victory came with its own chains. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Kids want to know if Uncle Jonathan is coming to David's soccer game Saturday. Emma thinks he's your boyfriend." Heat rose in Christabel's cheeks. Over the past month, Jonathan had become more than just her employer. He'd attended school events when she was overwhelmed, helped with homework when she was working late, and provided the kind of steady male presence the children desperately needed. But the growing attraction between them felt complicated, dangerous even. She was a woman emerging from an abusive marriage, learning to trust her own judgment again. The last thing she needed was to complicate her life with romance, no matter how appealing Jonathan's quiet strength might be. "There's more," Maria continued, unaware of Christabel's internal struggle. "We've learned that Anthony's been making calls from prison. Officially, they're to his lawyer. Unofficially, his lawyer has connections to the Petrov organization." This revelation hit Christabel like a physical blow. Even behind bars, Anthony was still manipulating, still scheming, still trying to control the narrative and destroy her life. What's he telling them? "We don't have specifics, but the increased chatter suggests he's providing information about your routines, your relationships, your vulnerabilities." Maria's expression was grim. "He's essentially put a target on your back to save himself." Jonathan stepped closer to Christabel, and she caught the scent of his cologne, something clean and woodsy that was nothing like Anthony's overpowering designer fragrances. "Maria, what are our options for immediate protection?" "I've already taken the liberty of assigning a security detail," Maria said. "They're discreet, but they're there. Ms. Manning, you haven't been alone for the past week, even if you haven't noticed them." Christabel thought back to the past few days. The jogger who seemed to follow the same route she took to the bookshop, the woman reading a book in the coffee shop across from Emma's school, the maintenance worker who'd been fixing the streetlight outside their house for 3 days running. "You've been watching me without my permission?" "I've been keeping you alive without your knowledge," Maria corrected. "There's a difference." The weight of the situation settled on Christabel's shoulders. She'd thought the hard part was over when Anthony was arrested. But now she was discovering that escaping an abusive marriage was just the beginning, especially when that marriage was connected to international criminal organizations. How do you think Christabel should handle these escalating threats? Should she accept the protection and uproot her children's lives again, or find another way to fight back? Let us know your thoughts below. "There's something else we need to discuss," Jonathan said, his voice gentler now. "The Foundation's first major initiative, the Safe House project we've been planning." Christabel looked up, grateful for a subject that didn't involve immediate physical danger. The Phoenix Foundation's primary goal was to create a network of secure residential facilities for women and children escaping domestic violence, complete with legal aid, job training, and educational support. "The Seattle location is ready," Jonathan continued. 12 apartments, child care facilities, legal clinics, even a small business incubator where residents can develop entrepreneurial skills. "We're ready to open next month." But Maria shook her head. With the current threat level, having Ms. Manning at the opening ceremony would be like painting a target on the facility. Every woman and child there would be at risk. The cruel irony wasn't lost on any of them. Christabel had created a foundation to help women escape situations like her own, but her very presence now threatened to endanger the people she was trying to help. "Then I won't go," Christabel said quietly. "The Foundation is bigger than my personal story. If my presence puts others at risk—" "Absolutely not," Jonathan interrupted, his voice carrying a firmness she'd never heard before. "You are the heart and soul of this foundation, Christabel. Your story, your strength, your determination, that's what gives hope to women who think escape is impossible. But if my presence puts people in danger, then we find another way," he said. "We don't let criminals dictate how we help victims of domestic violence. We don't let fear win." As Christabel looked at Jonathan, really looked at him, she saw something that had been missing from her life for so long. A man who respected her strength instead of trying to diminish it, who wanted to support her dreams instead of controlling them, who saw her as an equal partner rather than a possession to be managed. But she also saw the way he looked at her children when he thought she wasn't watching, the gentle patience he showed when Emma tested his boundaries, the genuine interest he took in David's artwork. This wasn't just attraction. This was something deeper, more dangerous, more hopeful than anything she'd felt in years. The realization terrified her almost as much as the anonymous threats. Her phone rang, interrupting the moment. The caller ID showed Detective Rodriguez's number. "Christabel." Rodriguez's voice was tight with urgency when she answered. "We've got a problem. Anthony's lawyer just filed an emergency motion claiming that you've been receiving threats because of your reckless cooperation with law enforcement. They're asking for the charges to be dismissed and for Anthony to be released pending a new investigation into your mental state and truthfulness." The room seemed to tilt around Christabel. After everything, the months of planning, the evidence gathering, the courage it had taken to finally fight back, Anthony was still finding ways to paint himself as the victim and her as the unstable one. "Can they do that?" she asked. "Not easily, but they can make our lives hell trying," Rodriguez admitted. "And here's the worst news. Someone leaked information about your cooperation to the press. Your name and photo are going to be on the front page of tomorrow's Seattle Times. Christabel sank into her chair, the implications crashing over her. If criminal organizations wanted to hurt her before, they'd have no trouble finding her now. And Emma and David, their faces might be in the newspaper too, innocent children dragged into their father's criminal world. "There's more," Rodriguez continued. "We intercepted a communication that suggests someone might be planning something for tomorrow night." "What kind of something?" "The kind that requires you and your children to disappear for a while." The safe house was supposed to be temporary, a nondescript apartment complex in Bellevue where federal witnesses stayed while testifying against organized crime. But as Christabel tucked Emma and David into unfamiliar beds for the third night, nothing about this felt temporary. "Mommy, when can we go home?" David asked, clutching the stuffed dinosaur Patricia had brought him the day before their father's arrest. "Soon, baby," Christabel whispered, though she had no idea if that was true. Outside their window, she could see Maria's security team maintaining their vigilant watch, but even their presence couldn't quiet the voice in her head that whispered she'd made a terrible mistake. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. "Foundation board meeting moved to tomorrow. The Hartwell Group wants to discuss a major donation. This could change everything." The Hartwell Group. Christabel frowned at the name. It sounded familiar, but she couldn't place where she'd heard it. In the chaos of the past week, details kept slipping through her mental fingers. A soft knock at the door made her freeze. It was nearly midnight, far too late for visitors. But when she peered through the peephole, she saw Patricia standing in the hallway, her normally perfect appearance disheveled and her face streaked with tears. "Patricia!" Christabel opened the door quickly, pulling her sister-in-law inside. "What are you doing here? How did you even find this place?" "I need to tell you something," Patricia said, her voice shaking. "Something I should have told you months ago." They moved to the small living area, where Patricia collapsed onto the couch and buried her face in her hands. "Christabel, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." A chill ran down Christabel's spine. "What are you talking about?" "The Hartwell Group. They're not legitimate investors." Patricia's words came out in a rush. "They're a front for the Petrov organization, and they've been watching you since you first started gathering evidence against Anthony." The room seemed to tilt around Christabel. "How do you know that?" Patricia looked up, and the guilt in her eyes was devastating. "Because they approached me 6 months ago. They knew about our plan, about the evidence you were collecting. They offered me protection for my own companies if I kept them informed about your activities." The betrayal hit Christabel like a physical blow. Patricia, the sister-in-law who'd held her while she cried, who'd helped her find the courage to fight back, who'd been her closest ally in taking down Anthony, had been feeding information to criminals all along. "You've been spying on me," Christabel whispered. "I've been trying to protect you." Patricia's voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what these people are capable of? They didn't just want Anthony's operation. They wanted to make sure no one else could ever expose them the way you did." Christabel's mind raced through the implications. Every plan she'd made, every move she'd calculated, every moment she'd thought she was staying one step ahead, the criminals had known about all of it. The security breaches, the leaked information to the press, the threats, that was all you? "No," Patricia said fiercely. "I never gave them anything that would hurt you or the children. But I did tell them about your meetings with federal agents, about the evidence you were collecting. I thought if they knew you were working with law enforcement, they'd leave you alone. Instead, you made me a bigger target." Patricia nodded miserably. And now they want more than just information. They want you to disappear permanently, and they want the federal case to collapse. They think if you're gone, the evidence becomes inadmissible. But even as Patricia's betrayal sank in, Christabel's lawyer brain was working, analyzing the situation from new angles. Patricia, how do they know about the Foundation's board meeting tomorrow? What? You just said they've been watching me for months, but I only scheduled that meeting this morning. I only told Jonathan about it. Christabel felt her blood turn to ice. Unless... The realization hit her like lightning. Jonathan. Sweet, supportive, seemingly perfect Jonathan who'd appeared in her life at exactly the right moment, who'd offered her a job when she needed it most, who'd provided protection and resources and everything she needed to feel safe. Jonathan, whose company was about to receive a major donation from the Hartwell Group. Oh God, Christabel breathed. He's been part of this all along. Patricia's eyes widened. What are you talking about? But Christabel was already moving, grabbing her laptop and pulling up the incorporation documents for Hale Industries. She'd never thought to investigate Jonathan's background. Why would she? He'd been her savior, her employer, possibly even her future. But as she dug deeper into the company's financial records, using skills she'd learned during her brief law career, a horrifying picture began to emerge. Hale Industries had received significant funding from shell companies connected to the Petrov organization. Not recently, for years. Patricia, she said slowly, what do you know about Jonathan Hale? Nothing. You met him through the Foundation job, right? Through that interview Patricia arranged. Patricia stopped mid-sentence, her face going pale. Oh my God. I arranged that meeting. They asked me to arrange that meeting. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Jonathan hadn't hired Christabel because of her qualifications. He'd hired her because the Petrov organization wanted someone close to her, someone who could monitor her activities, control her resources, and ultimately eliminate her when she'd served her purpose. Every kind gesture, every moment of growing attraction, every tender interaction with her children, it had all been an elaborate performance designed to make her trust him completely. The security team, Christabel said, her voice hollow. Maria Santos and her people aren't protecting me. They're watching me, making sure I don't run before they're ready to make their move. Her phone buzzed with another text from Jonathan. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. The children are welcome to come to the office. I'll have the conference room set up with games and snacks for them. He wanted Emma and David at the meeting. He wanted all three of them in one place, under the control of his security team, far from any genuine help. We have to run, Patricia said urgently. Right now, tonight. I have a car outside. No. Christabel's voice was steadier than she felt. Running makes us victims again. And these people, they don't stop hunting their targets just because they change locations. She looked at her children, sleeping peacefully in the bedroom, unaware that their mother's attempt to build a new life had walked them straight into the heart of a criminal organization. Emma and David deserved better than a lifetime of running and hiding. Patricia, you said they approached you 6 months ago. Do you still have contact with them? What? Yes, but Christabel. And they trust you? They still think you're working for them? Patricia nodded hesitantly. As far as they know, I've been their inside source all along. For the first time in days, Christabel smiled, not the broken, grateful smile of a rescued victim, but the cold, calculating smile of a woman who'd learned to think 3 moves ahead of her opponents. Then it's time for you to earn their trust completely, she said. Because I have a plan. What do you think Christabel's new plan involves? Will she use Patricia's connection to the criminals against them, or is there an even bigger twist coming? Share your theories below. She moved to the window and looked out at Maria's security team, seeing them now for what they really were, not protectors, but prison guards waiting for the order to execute their real mission. Patricia, tomorrow morning, you're going to call your contact with the Petrov organization. You're going to tell them that I figured out the truth about Jonathan, and that I'm planning to run with the children. But that's exactly what they want to hear. No, Christabel interrupted. What they want is for me to disappear quietly. But what I'm going to do is disappear loudly, publicly, in a way that draws so much attention that they'll have no choice but to abandon their operation entirely. She pulled up another screen on her laptop, the contact information for every major news outlet in Seattle, every federal agent she'd worked with, every lawyer she'd ever known. By tomorrow night, the entire world is going to know that Hale Industries is a front for international money laundering, that Jonathan Hale has been using a domestic violence charity to target vulnerable women, and that the Petrov organization has infiltrated legitimate businesses throughout the Pacific Northwest. But even as she outlined her plan, Christabel's heart was breaking. She'd allowed herself to believe, for just a few weeks, that she might be capable of love again. She'd watched Jonathan with her children and imagined a future where they could be a real family, where her kids could have a father figure who genuinely cared about them. Instead, she delivered her children into the hands of someone who saw them as leverage, as tools to manipulate their mother into compliance. The betrayal hurt worse than Anthony's affairs, worse than his psychological warfare, worse than anything he'd ever done to her. Because with Anthony, she'd at least known who her enemy was. Christabel, Patricia said softly, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but can you ever forgive me? Christabel looked at her sister-in-law, the woman who'd betrayed her trust, but who was also the only person in the world who truly understood the situation they were facing. Patricia, forgiveness is a luxury I can't afford right now, she said. But redemption? That's something you can earn, starting tomorrow. As she began typing her first message to Detective Rodriguez, explaining everything she discovered about Jonathan and the true scope of the criminal operation, Christabel felt something she hadn't experienced in months. The fierce determination that had gotten her through law school, that had built her legal practice, that had sustained her through the darkest days of her marriage. She wasn't just fighting for her freedom anymore. She was fighting for every woman who'd ever been targeted by predators who hid behind legitimate businesses and charitable causes. She was fighting for a world where her children could grow up without looking over their shoulders. And this time, she wasn't going to settle for just surviving. This time, she was going to win. At 5:47 a.m., Christabel's world collapsed. She woke to silence, the kind of absolute quiet that immediately triggers a mother's instincts. The children's room was too still, too peaceful. When she pushed open the door, her heart stopped. Empty beds. Perfectly made, as if Emma and David had never been there at all. On David's pillow lay a single photograph, her children sitting in what appeared to be a luxury car, both of them smiling and waving at the camera, unaware they were being kidnapped. On the back, written in Jonathan's familiar handwriting, Phoenix Foundation Board Meeting, 9 a.m. Come alone, or they take a much longer car ride. The security monitors showed no signs of forced entry. Maria's team had simply walked out with Emma and David in the middle of the night, probably telling the children they were going on a special adventure with Uncle Jonathan. Christabel's hands shook as she called Patricia, but the phone went straight to voicemail. She tried Detective Rodriguez. Same result. Agent Martinez. No answer. Every single person she'd trusted, every ally she'd counted on, had vanished into the pre-dawn darkness. She was completely alone. The realization hit her like a physical blow. They'd been planning this all along. Every federal agent, every law enforcement contact, every piece of support she'd relied on, it had all been an elaborate setup to isolate her completely when the moment came. Her laptop was gone. Her phone showed no signal. Even the landline had been disconnected sometime during the night. But worse than her own helplessness was the knowledge that Emma and David were trapped with people who saw them as nothing more than leverage. Her 8- and 10-year-old babies, who still believed the world was fundamentally safe, were now in the hands of criminals who had no qualms about eliminating entire families. A soft knock at the door made her freeze. When she looked through the peephole, she saw a young woman in a delivery uniform holding a small package. "Delivery for Christabel Manning," the woman called out. Against every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, Christabel opened the door. The woman handed her a small box and walked away without another word. Inside the box was a phone, already powered on, already connected to a video call. Jonathan's face filled the screen, but he looked different now. Gone was the gentle concern, the supportive warmth, the man she'd begun to care for. In his place was someone cold, calculating, and utterly without conscience. "Good morning, Christabel," he said, his voice carrying none of its previous tenderness. "I hope you slept well." Behind him, she could see her children sitting at a conference table, coloring books spread in front of them. Emma looked up and waved at the camera. "Hi, Mommy. Uncle Jonathan brought us to his special office, and we're going to have pancakes." The normalcy of it, her daughter's bright smile, David's careful attention to staying inside the lines of his coloring book, made Christabel's knees buckle. They had no idea they were prisoners. "As you can see, the children are perfectly safe and happy," Jonathan continued. "They think this is all part of the surprise party we discussed for Mommy's new job. Emma even helped me pick out decorations for the conference room." "You bastard," Christabel whispered, but Jonathan continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Now, here's how this is going to work. In 3 hours, you're going to walk into the Hale Industries building and attend our board meeting as planned. You're going to smile, you're going to accept the generous donation from a Hartwell group, and you're going to announce your retirement from the Phoenix Foundation due to the stress of recent events." The screen shifted to show a prepared statement, typed and ready for her signature. It was a complete confession, admitting that she'd fabricated evidence against Anthony, that her cooperation with federal agents had been motivated by mental instability, that she was voluntarily withdrawing all testimony and asking for the charges to be dropped. "After you sign this document and make your statement to the press, you and the children will be relocated to a beautiful facility in Eastern Europe where you can live quietly and comfortably for the rest of your lives. Think of it as witness protection, but more permanent." Eastern Europe. Christabel knew exactly what that meant. Women and children who disappeared into the Petrov Organization's network were never seen again. They became untraceable, undocumented, completely at the mercy of people who viewed human life as a commodity. "And if I refuse?" Jonathan's smile was arctic. "Well, that would be unfortunate for Emma and David. You see, there are many families in our network who would love to adopt such beautiful, intelligent children. Of course, they'd need to forget their previous lives entirely. Children are remarkably adaptable when properly motivated." The threat was clear: sign the document and disappear with her children, or refuse and watch them disappear without her. "You have 2 hours to decide," Jonathan said. "But Christabel, I should mention, Patricia sends her apologies." The screen shifted again, and Christabel saw Patricia sitting in what appeared to be the same conference room, but her hands were zip-tied behind her chair and there was a bruise forming on her left cheek. "It seems your sister-in-law had a change of heart about our arrangement," Jonathan explained. "She came to us last night, claiming she wanted to help you escape. Unfortunately, loyalty is a non-negotiable requirement in our organization." Patricia looked directly into the camera, her eyes filled with regret and terror. "Christabel, I tried to warn Rodriguez, but they were already watching her. The federal agents, the task force, they've all been compromised. There's no one coming to help." The screen went black. Christabel sank to the floor, the phone falling from her nerveless fingers. Every ally was gone. Every plan had been anticipated. Every hope of rescue had been eliminated. She was a single mother with no resources, no backup, no support, facing an international criminal organization that had spent months positioning every piece on the board. They had her children, they controlled the narrative, and they'd systematically destroyed every avenue of help she might have turned to. For the first time since this nightmare began, Christabel allowed herself to truly despair. She'd been so proud of her intelligence, her planning, her ability to stay 3 steps ahead of Anthony. But she'd been playing checkers while the Petrov organization was playing chess, and now Emma and David were paying the price for her arrogance. The apartment felt like a tomb, silent, airless, suffocating. She thought about Anthony, probably laughing in his prison cell as he realized his ex-wife was about to destroy herself more thoroughly than he ever could have managed. She thought about all the women the Phoenix Foundation would never help, all the victims who would never get justice because she'd been too naive to recognize the trap until it was too late. But most of all, she thought about Emma and David, trusting and innocent, sitting in that conference room believing that the adults around them had their best interests at heart. Her phone, her real phone, buzzed with a single text from an unknown number, "Conference Room 12A. 1 hour. Come alone or they disappear forever." They'd moved up the timeline. No more 2 hours to plan, no more time to find alternatives. Just a single hour to walk into their trap and surrender everything she'd fought for. Christabel pulled herself off the floor and walked to the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at her looked defeated, broken, exactly the way Anthony had always wanted her to look. Red-rimmed eyes, hollow cheeks, shoulders bowed under the weight of impossible choices. What would you do if you had to choose between saving your children and seeking justice? Is there any way for Christabel to win when the enemy holds all the cards? Let us know your thoughts below, because right now, it looks like evil is about to triumph. She had 58 minutes to decide whether to save her children by destroying every other family these monsters would target in the future, or to fight for justice and lose Emma and David forever. For the first time in months, Christabel had no plan, no backup strategy, no clever solution hiding in the shadows. She was completely, utterly, devastatingly alone. And the clock was ticking. The woman in the mirror closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, something had shifted. Not hope. Hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not confidence. Confidence required belief in a positive outcome. But determination. Cold, absolute, unbending determination. If they wanted to destroy her, they'd have to work for it. If they thought she'd go quietly into their trap, they'd underestimated the woman who'd survived 15 years of psychological warfare. And if they believed that threatening her children would make her weak, they were about to learn exactly how dangerous a mother with nothing left to lose could be. 56 minutes. Christabel stared at her reflection, and suddenly her mother's voice echoed in her memory, words spoken during her darkest days in law school when she'd called home crying about impossible cases and unwinnable arguments. "Christina, mi amor, they don't know what you're made of yet. But they will. Her mother had been the first woman in their family to attend college, working 3 jobs to put herself through night school while raising 2 daughters alone. Maria Elena Rodriguez had taught her that sometimes the only way to win was to change the rules of the game entirely. And Christabel had been playing by their rules this whole time. She moved to the kitchenette and pulled out the small toolkit she'd kept hidden behind the coffee maker. Not the obvious hiding places that any search would uncover, but the mundane domestic space that predators like Anthony and Jonathan always overlooked. Inside was something she'd prepared months ago but never thought she'd need: a burner phone with a single number programmed into it. Not Detective Rodriguez. Not Agent Martinez. Not anyone connected to official law enforcement. Marcus Chen's personal number. Her old law school study partner had given her this phone during one of their clandestine meetings, with strict instructions: only use this if everything else fails. If every official channel is compromised. If you need help that doesn't exist on any government payroll. Marcus answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. "Chris. Where are you?" "They have my children, Marcus." Her voice was steady now, professional. "They have Emma and David, and they want me to sign a confession that will destroy the entire federal case." Location: Hale Industries Building, Conference Room 12A. In 54 minutes. Jesus Christ, Chris. Jonathan Hale? We've been tracking connections between Hale Industries and the Petrov network for 2 years, but we could never prove. You knew. The betrayal hit her like ice water. You knew and you didn't warn me? We suspected, but we had no proof until you provided it. Chris, listen to me very carefully. The federal task force Rodriguez was working with, they've been compromised for months. But there's another operation, completely off the books. Private contractors, former intelligence operatives, people who specialize in situations exactly like this. Vigilantes. Justice, when the system fails. Marcus's voice carried absolute conviction. Chris, I need you to trust me one more time. Can you do that? Christabel closed her eyes, thinking of Emma's bright smile in that video call, David's careful attention to his coloring book, completely unaware that their world was falling apart around them. What do you need me to do? First, you need to understand something. Jonathan's operation isn't just about silencing you. They're planning to use the Phoenix Foundation as a front for trafficking women and children out of domestic violence situations. You're not just their next victim, you're their prototype. The horror of it crashed over her. Every woman she'd hoped to help, every child she'd wanted to save, they would all become merchandise in the Petrov organization's network. But there's something they don't know, Marcus continued. Something we've been keeping very quiet while we built our own case. What? Patricia never betrayed you, Chris. She's been working with us from the beginning. The revelation hit her like lightning. What do you mean? 6 months ago, when the Petrov people first approached her, she came to us. We told her to play along, to feed them information that would make them confident while we built a parallel investigation. Every detail she gave them was carefully planned to lead them exactly where we wanted them. Christabel's legs nearly gave out. Patricia hadn't betrayed her. She'd been protecting her, at enormous personal risk. The bruise on her face in that video call? Part of her cover. She had to make them believe she'd tried to warn you and failed. Right now, she's probably gathering intelligence on their entire operation while they think she's their prisoner. For the first time in hours, Christabel felt something other than despair. but it was tempered by the reality of her situation. "Marcus, even if that's true, they still have my children." "No, Chris. They have 2 children. But those children aren't just Emma and David Manning anymore." "What are you talking about?" 3 months ago, when we realized how deep this operation went, we took precautions. Your children have been carrying GPS trackers in their backpacks, their shoes, even their clothing. But more than that, they've been carrying emergency transmitters that activate automatically if they're moved more than 5 miles from their registered location. Christabel's mind raced. "You mean?" "Every federal agency that isn't compromised has known exactly where Emma and David are since the moment they were taken. We've been tracking them, monitoring them, and preparing for extraction." But the relief was short-lived. "If you know where they are, why haven't you gotten them out?" "Because we needed Jonathan and his people to commit to their full plan. A kidnapping charge disappears if the children are returned safely and the victims don't cooperate. But human trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder of federal witnesses? Those charges stick even if the criminals try to back out at the last minute." Marcus's words painted a picture that was both terrifying and hopeful. "You're using my children as bait." "We're using you as bait, Chris. The children are under protection. They just don't know it yet. But we needed the Petrov organization to reveal the full scope of their operation, and you were the key to making that happen." 47 minutes. "What do you need me to do?" Christabel asked again. "Go to that meeting. Sign their documents. Let them think they've won completely. And then you're going to give a performance that will destroy them all." Marcus explained the plan in rapid, precise detail. Hidden in the conference room were recording devices that would capture every word, every admission, every threat made against her and the children. The board meeting with the Hartwell Group was actually a setup to get all the major players in one room where they could be arrested simultaneously. "But Chris, this is dangerous. These aren't white-collar criminals who'll surrender peacefully when they're caught. The moment they realize they've been trapped, they'll try to eliminate everyone who can testify against them. Including me. Including you. Are you prepared for that?" Christabel thought about Emma's dream of becoming a lawyer, just like Mommy used to be. She thought about David's gentle nature and artistic soul, about all the other children who would suffer if she didn't find the courage to see this through. "Marcus, I've been preparing for this my whole life. I just didn't know it." But there was more to Marcus's plan than just evidence gathering. While Christabel was in the conference room, Patricia would be working from inside the organization to identify all their trafficking routes, their financial networks, their contacts in various agencies. This wasn't just about stopping Jonathan. It was about dismantling the entire operation. "One more thing, Chris. The man you're going to meet in that conference room isn't Jonathan Hale." "What do you mean?" "Jonathan Hale died in a car accident in Prague 3 years ago. The man who's been running Hale Industries, the man who hired you, the man you—" Marcus paused delicately. "The man I started to fall for," Christabel finished. "His real name is Viktor Kozlov. He's Viktor Petrov's nephew, and he's been running their West Coast operations since 2019. Everything about his identity, his company, even his charitable interests, it's all been an elaborate cover for one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises in North America." The betrayal cut deep, but it also clarified something important. The man she'd begun to care about, the potential father figure she'd imagined for her children, that person had never existed at all. She'd been attracted to a carefully constructed lie designed to manipulate her emotions and make her vulnerable. But knowing the truth also freed her from the guilt she'd been carrying about endangering her children through her poor judgment. She hadn't failed as a mother by trusting the wrong person. She'd been targeted by professionals whose job it was to make her trust them. 39 minutes. Chris. Are you ready? Do you think Christabel can pull off this dangerous performance when everything depends on fooling some of the world's most dangerous criminals? What would you do in her situation? Share your thoughts below. Christabel looked in the mirror one last time, but now she saw something different. Not the broken victim Anthony had tried to create, not the grateful rescued woman Jonathan had pretended to help, but the fierce, intelligent, determined mother who would do anything to protect her children and stop monsters from hurting other families. Marcus, when this is over, I want something from you. Name it. I want to prosecute these cases myself. All of them. Every single person involved in trafficking women and children. Chris, you're not a practicing attorney anymore. Then I'll take the bar exam again. I'll rebuild my practice. I'll do whatever it takes. Her voice carried absolute conviction. These people targeted me because they thought I was weak, helpless, isolated. They're about to learn that they just handed their entire operation to someone who knows exactly how to destroy them legally, completely, and forever. Marcus laughed, not with humor, but with the satisfaction of someone who just watched a chess master make the move that would end the game. Jonathan Hale, or whoever he really is, has no idea what he's walking into, does he? No, Christabel said, straightening her shoulders and checking her watch. But he's about to find out. 36 minutes. Time to go to war. The Hale Industries building gleamed in the morning sun like a monument to legitimate success, but Christabel now saw it for what it really was, a beautiful facade hiding something rotten at its core. As she walked through the marble lobby, her heels clicking against the polished floor, she felt the weight of the recording devices Marcus's team had hidden in her clothing. Every word spoken in the next hour would be transmitted to federal agents positioned throughout the building. Every threat, every admission, every moment of criminal arrogance would be preserved forever. The elevator rose silently to the 12th floor, and with each passing floor, Christabel felt herself transforming. The desperate, frightened mother was being replaced by the prosecutor she'd once been, analytical, strategic, utterly focused on the destruction of her opponents. Conference room 12A was exactly as she'd expected, a gleaming boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, a massive table set for what appeared to be a legitimate business meeting. But the people seated around the table were anything but legitimate business people. Jonathan Victor sat at the head of the table, his familiar smile now seeming predatory rather than warm. To his right sat a woman Christabel didn't recognize, her silver hair pulled back severely and her eyes cold as winter. On the left, a man in an expensive suit who kept checking his phone impatiently. And at the far end of the table, Patricia sat with her hands folded calmly in her lap, no longer bound, no longer showing signs of being a prisoner. The bruise on her face was gone, makeup, Christabel realized, part of the performance. But most importantly, in the corner of the room, Emma and David sat at a small table covered with coloring books, tablets, and snacks. They looked up when she entered, Emma's face brightening immediately. "Mommy." Emma jumped up and ran to her, David close behind. "Uncle Jonathan said you were coming to work here now. Are we going to live in his big house?" Christabel knelt and pulled both children close, breathing in their familiar scent, checking them quickly for any signs of harm. They seemed genuinely happy, completely unaware of the danger they'd been in. "We'll see, sweetheart," she said softly. Mommy has some business to take care of first. Victor stood, his expression perfectly calibrated to convey regret and gentle authority. Christabel, I'm so glad you came. I know this situation has been challenging for all of us. The silver-haired woman spoke without introduction. Ms. Manning, I represent certain international interests that have been inconvenienced by your cooperation with federal authorities. We're hoping to reach a mutually beneficial resolution. Christabel took her seat at the table, noting how they'd positioned her so that she faced away from the children, a calculated psychological tactic to remind her what was at stake. I understand you have documents for me to sign, she said, her voice steady and professional. The man with the phone slid a folder across the table. A full retraction of your testimony, an admission that evidence was fabricated due to emotional distress, and a request for all charges against your ex-husband to be dropped. As Christabel opened the folder, she noticed something the criminals couldn't see, a tiny reflection in the window behind Victor. Marcus was positioned in the building across the street, watching through high-powered scopes, ready to coordinate the tactical response. But more importantly, she noticed something else in that reflection. Emma and David weren't alone in their corner. A woman in janitorial uniform was cleaning nearby, too close, too attentive, her movements too practiced for a mere cleaning lady. Federal protection, disguised as maintenance staff. This is quite comprehensive, Christabel said, reading through the documents. But I have some questions about the financial arrangements mentioned here. Victor's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. What questions? Well, according to this clause, I'll be relocated to a secure facility for my protection. But the location isn't specified. Where exactly will my children and I be living? Somewhere safe, the silver-haired woman said dismissively. Somewhere the federal authorities can't pressure you into further cooperation. I see. And the Phoenix Foundation? What happens to all the women and children we were planning to help? This time, Victor's mask slipped completely. The foundation will continue under new management, serving clients who would benefit from our expanded services. There it was. The admission Marcus needed. The Phoenix Foundation would become a trafficking pipeline, using domestic violence victims as inventory for the Petrov organization's international network. And if I refuse to sign these documents? The man with the phone looked up for the first time, his eyes flat and emotionless. Then your children will be enrolled in one of our educational programs overseas. They'll receive excellent care, but you won't see them again. Emma looked up from her coloring book. Mommy, what's he talking about? Nothing, sweetheart. Keep coloring your picture. But Christabel's prosecutorial instincts were fully engaged now. She needed more admissions, more evidence, more complete confessions that would ensure none of these people ever saw freedom again. Victor, she said, using his real name deliberately. The room went dead silent. Victor's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup, and the silver-haired woman's eyes narrowed dangerously. I'm sorry. Viktor Kozlov, nephew of Viktor Petrov, currently wanted by Interpol for human trafficking, money laundering, and murder. You really thought I wouldn't figure it out eventually. The pretense evaporated instantly. Victor's friendly demeanor disappeared, replaced by cold rage. You clever little bitch. How long have you known? Long enough to document everything. Your real identity, your connection to the Petrov organization, your plan to use the Phoenix Foundation as a trafficking front. Oh, and Victor? That charming performance you've been putting on for months? It was all recorded. She pulled out the burner phone Marcus had given her and showed them the screen. The call was still connected, still transmitting everything being said in the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet Special Agent Sarah Martinez, FBI Financial Crimes Division. She's been listening to our entire conversation." Agent Martinez's voice came through the phone speaker, clear and official. "Victor Kozlov, Helena Vasquez, and Dmitry Sokolov, you are all under arrest for conspiracy to commit human trafficking, money laundering, and kidnapping." The silver-haired woman, Helena, reached for something inside her jacket, but the janitor moved with lightning speed, tackling her before she could draw whatever weapon she'd been reaching for. The fake janitor spoke into her radio. "Target secured. Send in the teams." But Victor wasn't finished. His rage had transformed into something much more dangerous: desperate calculation. "You think you've won," he snarled, pulling out a gun that had been hidden beneath the conference table. "Those children don't leave this room alive." Emma screamed. David dropped his crayon and ran toward Christabel, but Victor swung the weapon toward them. "Nobody moves, or I start with the boy." This was the moment Christabel had been preparing for without realizing it, not just the months of gathering evidence, but her entire life. Every year of law school, every case she'd worked, every night she'd stayed up reading legal precedents, every moment of surviving Anthony's psychological warfare, it had all been preparation for this single instant when her children's lives hung in the balance. "Victor," she said, her voice carrying absolute calm, "before you do something that can't be undone, there's one more thing you should know. Shut up. I'm done listening to you. Patricia never betrayed me." Victor's eyes flicked toward his sister-in-law, and in that moment of distraction, Patricia moved. But she didn't try to disarm Victor or tackle him or put herself between him and the children. Instead, she pulled out her own phone and pressed a single button. The conference room's lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, but in those crucial seconds of darkness and confusion, the federal agents moved. The janitor had Victor disarmed and on the ground before the backup lighting was fully operational. Emma and David were swept up by two more agents who had been posing as building maintenance, carried quickly out of the line of fire and toward the elevators. "Mommy!" Emma cried as they were taken away, but Christabel could see they were being protected, not harmed. "It's okay, baby. These are the good guys. I'll see you in just a minute." Victor struggled against the agents restraining him, his face twisted with pure hatred. "This isn't over, Christabel. The organization is bigger than you can imagine. They'll come for you. They'll come for your children. You can't hide forever." Christabel walked over to where Victor lay handcuffed on the floor, kneeling so she could look him directly in the eyes. "Victor, I want you to remember this moment. Remember how it feels to be completely helpless, completely at the mercy of people who see you as nothing more than a problem to be solved. Because that's how you've made dozens of women and children feel." She stood up, brushing off her skirt with the same casual gesture she might use after a successful court presentation. "But here's the thing you never understood about survivors, Victor. We don't stay broken. We get stronger. And we get justice." Agent Martinez entered the room, flanked by a team of federal agents. "Ms. Manning, are you and your children all right?" "We're fine. Better than fine, actually." Patricia approached, and for the first time, Christabel could see her sister-in-law's true face. Not the broken victim, not the guilty betrayer, but a woman who'd risked everything to help bring down a criminal empire. "I'm sorry for what you went through these past few days," Patricia said. "We needed them to believe they had complete control, that every plan had worked perfectly." How long have you been working with federal agents? Since Anthony was first arrested. Marcus reached out to me when they realized how deep the Petrov connections went. We knew they'd try to manipulate you through someone close to you, so I volunteered to be that person. But there was more to the story, and Agent Martinez was clearly eager to share it. Ms. Manning, what you've helped us accomplish today goes far beyond just this local operation. The evidence you've gathered, combined with Patricia's intelligence work, has given us everything we need to dismantle the Petrov organization's entire North American network. She gestured toward the windows, where Christabel could now see federal vehicles surrounding the building, agents escorting dozens of people in handcuffs toward waiting transport vehicles. Simultaneous raids are happening right now in 15 cities. Bank accounts are being frozen, properties are being seized, and over 200 victims are being rescued from trafficking situations. What do you think Christabel's next move should be now that she's won this incredible victory? Should she focus on rebuilding her life, or is there something even bigger she wants to accomplish? Let us know your thoughts below. But the most satisfying moment came when Agent Martinez handed Christabel a document that had just been transmitted from the federal courthouse downtown. By the way, all charges against your ex-husband have been upgraded. Instead of just money laundering, Anthony Manning is now facing federal conspiracy charges that carry a minimum 25-year sentence. His cooperation with the Petrov organization while in prison made him an accessory to everything they've done. Christabel thought about Anthony, sitting in his cell, probably expecting to be released when her confession destroyed the federal case against him. Instead, he just guaranteed himself a life sentence. There's one more thing, Agent Martinez continued, her expression shifting to something more personal. The Phoenix Foundation doesn't have to shut down. In fact, with the Petrov organization's seized assets, we're looking at the largest victim compensation fund in federal history. Your foundation is going to receive enough funding to help thousands of women and children. The room was clearing now, criminals being led away in handcuffs, evidence being catalogued, agents conducting final sweeps for security. But Christabel remained by the window, looking out at the city that had nearly become her graveyard and was now the site of her greatest triumph. Emma and David appeared in the doorway, escorted by agents but clearly unharmed and excited rather than traumatized. "Mommy, were those real FBI agents?" Emma asked breathlessly. "They showed us their badges and everything." "They were, sweetheart." "And were you helping them catch bad guys?" Christabel knelt and pulled both children close. "Yes, I was. And now those bad guys can't hurt anyone else's families." David looked up with serious 8-year-old eyes. "Are we safe now, Mommy?" For the first time in months, Christabel could answer that question with complete honesty. "Yes, baby. We're safe now. We're all safe." But even as she held her children, Christabel's mind was already working ahead. The Phoenix Foundation would rise from the ashes of this operation stronger than ever. She would rebuild her legal practice, specializing in prosecuting human trafficking cases. And she would make sure that every woman who found herself trapped the way she had been would have the resources, the support, and the legal firepower to fight back. Viktor Kozlov had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed that breaking her would make her weak. Instead, it had made her unstoppable. The elevator descended in comfortable silence, Emma's small hand clasped firmly in Christabel's left, David holding her right. Through the glass walls, they could see the organized chaos of federal agents processing evidence, interviewing witnesses, and coordinating with international law enforcement agencies. But for Christabel, The most beautiful sight was the reflection of her family in the elevator's polished steel, whole, safe, and free. "Mrs. Manning?" Agent Martinez's voice came through Christabel's earpiece. "There's someone here who'd like to speak with you." When the elevator doors opened in the lobby, Christabel saw Detective Rodriguez waiting by the reception desk, but she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a woman in an expensive suit who looked vaguely familiar. "Christabel Manning?" The woman extended her hand with a warm smile. "I'm Judge Catherine Walsh from the Federal District Court. I wanted to meet the woman who just helped us take down one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises we've ever encountered." Judge Walsh. Christabel remembered her now. She'd been featured in legal journals as one of the most respected federal judges on the West Coast, known particularly for her work on human trafficking cases. "Your Honor, I was just trying to protect my children. And in doing so, you've protected hundreds of other families." Judge Walsh knelt to Emma and David's level. "Your mom is a hero, you know that?" Emma beamed with pride. "She's a lawyer. She catches bad guys." "Actually," Judge Walsh said, standing and addressing Christabel directly about that, "Detective Rodriguez tells me you've expressed interest in returning to legal practice." "Eventually, yes. I'd need to update my bar certification, rebuild my practice." "What if I told you there was another option?" Judge Walsh's expression grew serious. "The Department of Justice is creating a new task force specifically focused on dismantling human trafficking networks. We need prosecutors who understand these operations from the inside, who know how criminals target vulnerable women and children." The offer hung in the air like a golden opportunity wrapped in challenge. You'd be working directly with federal agents, Interpol, and international law enforcement. It would mean travel, long hours, high-profile cases that would put you in the public eye. Judge Walsh paused meaningfully. It would also mean ensuring that organizations like the Petrov Network never get the chance to hurt families like yours again. Christabel looked down at Emma and David, who were listening with the intense focus children bring to adult conversations they know are important. "Mom," Emma said solemnly, "if you can stop other bad guys like Daddy and the fake Uncle Jonathan, you should do it." David nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah. And we can help. I can draw pictures of the bad guys so everyone knows what they look like." The innocence of their offer made all the adults smile, but it also crystallized something for Christabel. Her children had lived through this nightmare and emerged not traumatized, but empowered. They'd seen their mother fight back against impossible odds and win. They'd learned that victims could become victors, that survivors could become champions for others. "Judge Walsh," Christabel said, her voice carrying the conviction that had gotten her through Harvard Law School and would carry her through whatever came next, "when do I start?" But before Judge Walsh could answer, Patricia appeared at Christabel's elbow, slightly out of breath and carrying a manila envelope. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you need to see immediately." Patricia handed her the envelope with an expression that mixed satisfaction with barely contained excitement. Inside were legal documents that made Christabel's heart race. "Anthony's assets," Patricia explained. "All of them. The courts have ruled that since his criminal activities were funded by marital property, everything he acquired during your marriage is subject to forfeiture. But as the innocent spouse, you're entitled to compensation for your losses." Christabel scanned the documents, her lawyer brain quickly processing the numbers. The house, the cars, Anthony's business interests, even his hidden offshore accounts. Everything was being transferred to her name, with additional damages awarded for the emotional distress and endangerment he'd caused. "This is She began, then stopped as the full implications hit her. Enough to fund the Phoenix Foundation for the next decade, Patricia finished. Enough to ensure that every woman who needs help escaping domestic violence will have a place to go, legal representation, job training, and long-term support. But there was more in the envelope. Judge Walsh was smiling as Christabel pulled out the final document. The Hale Industries building and all its assets are also being forfeited, Judge Walsh explained. The federal government is transferring ownership to your foundation. You'll have a permanent headquarters, conference facilities, and residential space for families transitioning out of dangerous situations. Emma tugged on Christabel's sleeve. "Mommy, what does all that mean?" Christabel knelt down again, pulling both children close as she tried to find words that would capture the magnitude of what had just happened. "It means, sweetheart, that all the bad things that happen to our family are going to help protect other families. It means that Mommy's new job is going to help lots of other mommies and children who need someone to fight for them." "Like superheroes?" David asked with wide eyes. "Exactly like superheroes," Detective Rodriguez said, joining their circle. "Speaking of which, there's a press conference scheduled for this afternoon. The FBI wants to announce the success of this operation, and they'd like you to be there." The thought of facing cameras and reporters made Christabel's stomach clench, but she understood the importance. Other women needed to see that escape was possible, that fighting back could succeed, that justice could win. How do you think Christabel should handle her newfound platform and resources? What message would you want to send to other survivors who might be watching? Share your thoughts below, because this victory belongs to everyone who's ever felt trapped and powerless. As they walked toward the building's exit, Christabel's phone rang. She almost ignored it, but the caller ID made her pause. Marcus Chen. "Chris, are you somewhere you can talk privately?" She stepped aside, gesturing for the others to continue toward the waiting federal vehicles. "Marcus, we did it. We actually did it." "You did it," he corrected firmly. "But Chris, there's something else. Something that's going to sound impossible, but I need you to hear me out." "What is it?" "The evidence you gathered, the methods you used, the way you turned a personal crisis into a systematic takedown of an international criminal organization. It's being studied by law enforcement agencies around the world." Christabel frowned. "Studied how?" "As a model. A template for how to fight back against organized crime when traditional law enforcement methods fail. The FBI wants to develop training programs based on your experience. Interpol is requesting consultations on similar cases." The scope of what Marcus was describing began to sink in. Her personal nightmare, her desperate fight for her children's safety, was becoming something much larger. "Chris, you've accidentally created a new paradigm for combating human trafficking and organized crime. The Manning model, that's what they're calling it." Before she could fully process this revelation, Emma appeared at her side. "Mommy, the FBI lady says they have ice cream in their car and we can eat it while we drive to the press conference. Can we? Please?" Christabel looked at her daughter, 8 years old, resilient, brave, completely unaware that her mother's fight to protect her had just changed the way the world approaches organized crime. "Of course we can, sweetheart." As they walked toward the federal vehicles, Patricia fell into step beside her. "Christabel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to know that whatever answer you give is perfectly okay." "What is it?" "Can you forgive me? For the deception, for letting you think I'd betrayed you, for all the fear and pain you went through thinking you were completely alone." Christabel stopped walking and turned to face her sister-in-law, the woman who'd risked everything to help bring down the criminals who'd targeted their family. "Patricia, you saved us. All of us. Not just me and the children, but every victim those monsters would have hurt in the future. There's nothing to forgive." They embraced there on the sidewalk, two women who'd survived the worst kind of betrayal and emerged stronger, surrounded by federal agents and evidence of their victory. Agent Martinez approached with a final update. "Ms. Manning, I wanted you to know, we've already received calls from law enforcement agencies in 12 countries requesting consultation on similar cases. Your story is going international in the best possible way." As they reached the cars, David looked up with a serious expression. "Mommy, are we rich now?" Christabel laughed, the first genuinely carefree sound she'd made in months. "We're something better than rich, baby. We're free." But Emma, ever the future lawyer, had a more practical question. "Mommy, if you're going to be catching bad guys for your new job, do we get to help sometimes?" "You're going to help every day," Christabel assured her. "Every time you're kind to someone who's scared, every time you stand up for someone who's being hurt, every time you show the world that being strong and being good can go together, that's helping." As the federal caravan pulled away from the Hale Industries building, Christabel watched it recede in the side mirror. The building that had been designed to be her prison was now going to be headquarters for the largest victim advocacy foundation in the Pacific Northwest. The Phoenix Foundation would rise from the ashes of the Petrov organization's destruction, funded by the very assets that had been used to hurt innocent people. Anthony was facing life in prison, his empire of manipulation and control reduced to rubble. Viktor Kozlov and his associates were beginning what would likely be decades behind bars, their human trafficking network dismantled completely. And Emma and David were safe, happy, and proud of their mother, not despite what she'd endured, but because of how she turned survival into victory. The woman who had signed divorce papers in fear and desperation was gone forever. In her place sat a federal prosecutor, a foundation director, and a mother who had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is refuse to stay broken. The car pulled onto the freeway, heading toward a press conference where Christabel would tell the world that no matter how powerful your enemies seem, no matter how isolated you feel, no matter how impossible escape appears, there is always a way to fight back. There is always a way to win. And sometimes, winning means building an empire out of someone else's treachery. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If this touched your heart, then you're going to love the next one. It's just as powerful, and even more intriguing than you can imagine. So don't stop here. Check out more videos on my channel and continue the journey. I'll be waiting for you on the other side of that story. See you there.